presenter is Fred McConnell, and I'm so happy to introduce him. Fred and I have worked on a few projects together, and following a 35-year career in the Canadian high-tech sector and a growing awareness that Ontario watersheds are increasingly under pressure, Fred made the decision to shift his focus to preservation of these critical resources. With the onset of COVID, his family permanently relocated to their home in North Hastings on Wollaston Lake. And he has acquired many skills over the years that he is applying to monitoring and sustaining our watersheds, including over 30 plus years experience in the fast-paced IT solution design, delivery, and operations, as well as lake water quality monitoring, analysis, and communications experience through the Lake Steward role on Wollaston Lake, and a Master of Environmental Monitoring and Assessments Freshwater Ecology Lab placement. He has also been in the MNRF liaison role on the North Hastings Community Fish Hatchery Board. And like I mentioned before, the Lake Steward, he's been working on invasive species management permitting and structural engineering permitting processes for Wollaston Lake. He has a wealth of experience in business case analysis, justification, partnership building, organizational change management, and project delivery. And he effectively communicates complex science and technology information to build support and affect change with audiences in mind. Please welcome Fred McConnell.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And I too need to shorten that biography. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. I hope I effectively communicate these technical and complex topics to the entire audience. Next slide, please. So similar to the previous presentation from Jesse, we've looked at invasive species as one of a number of threats that are affecting Wollaston Lake. And this is a chart that I borrowed from Dr. Paul Frost in the Trent Freshwater Ecology Lab, who has been studying 50 lakes in the Kawartha Lakes region for the last 5 to 7 years and has a broad database. So he's a wealth of information that we've been tapping into. So what I've shown here is the threats and initiatives that we have undertaken on Wollaston Lake. The one I'm going to talk to you about today is invasive Eurasian milfoil and the Milfoil Action Committee that we've set up to address that. But it's not the only initiative that we're undertaking. We've worked with our community municipal government to put in place a septic reinspection program. We worked with Watersheds Canada to run the Love Your Lake program on Wollaston Lake to get valuable data that we could use to prioritize our initiatives, as well as to educate people on the value of natural shorelines. And we've run contests, excuse me, to encourage people to improve their shorelines. Next slide, please. So a few characteristics about Wollaston Lake. So, excuse me, we are about 30 kilometers south of Bancroft and 30 kilometers east of Apsley. So we're on the edge of the Kawartha Lake system. We're a cold, deep water, natural reproducing lake trout lake, surface area of about 900 acres. We're in a oligotrophic nutrient profile, which means we have low nutrient levels, typically below 10 micrograms per liter of total phosphorus. We have 260 cottages / permanent homes, and with COVID, we're seeing more people move to the lake, such as our family. We also have 2 campgrounds that encompass 326 sites, and we have a public boat launch. And we believe that is the vector or the point of entry for Eurasian milfoil into our lake. We're located in Zone 15 from a fishing regulations standpoint. And the reason I mention that is Zone 15 has a large proportion of lake trout lakes similar to ours, and is undergoing an extensive review of changes to the fishing regulation to try and preserve those ecosystems for lake trout and brook trout. And we are officially deemed at capacity from a development standpoint as of 2002, Hastings official plan. Next slide, please. So in terms of looking at Eurasian milfoil, I thought it was important to establish what our objectives were. And this is really based on the Love Your Lake program and talking to industry experts at forums such as this, building relationships with organizations that have a large amount of expertise. So first and foremost, we wanted to attempt to limit the spread of milfoil without causing additional damage. We didn't want the medicine to be worse than the disease, so to speak. We wanted to integrate our milfoil initiatives within a comprehensive lake management plan. And what we're finding is, as you think back to the threats addressing our lakes, is milfoil is one that's very visible. It gets people's attention. So you can use it as an opportunity to also discuss with those people other aspects of lake health and what they can do as property owners to address a broader scope than just milfoil. So we wanted to engage a broad view of stakeholders, both property owners and people who use the lake on a seasonal or daily basis. And we wanted to engage our municipal council, as we know how important it is to get their support and have them promote bylaws that that help preserve water quality. And that, last but not least, to make sure we adopted best practices by partnering with organizations such as Watersheds Canada. So we made sure that we were taking advantage of the experience of others. Next slide, please. So this is a chronology, brief chronology. I tried to keep it as short as I could of our experience in dealing with Eurasian milfoil. So we started in 2017 when FOCA, the Federation of Ontario Cottage Associations, provided free of charge to lake associations a consultant who was a botanist who could come and survey our lakes. And at that time, we confirmed we had Eurasian milfoil present and that it was in approximately 65 to 70% to a limited extent of the native weed beds in the lake. So it had been there for a while, but we had noticed it and it had caught our attention at that point, because it was at that point it was really starting to get established. So first thing, we established that it was present and where it was. Second, we started an education program. So we partnered with the Land Between charity to run a combined shoreline naturalization and milfoil, what is it, what can you do about it, session in 2018. And that was the first of our education programs. And at that time, we used a grant from FOCA to purchase rakes and nets that could be borrowed by landowners to manually remove milfoil from the waterfront, because that is the first thing that you can do as an owner without a permit. And we educated them on where you can do that straight out from your shore along your property line, and the need to respect the work in the water window, which for our lake starts July 15th and ends September 30th, and that's based on the fish species and their spawning times of year. In 2019, we applied for and were approved by Watersheds Canada for the Love Your Lake program. We viewed this as extremely important because it would give us data that we could use to make sure we were apportioning our resources along the lines of the areas that were important to our members and lakefront property owners. In 2020, we completed that review. We, in 2019, also started marking beds so that we could make people aware that not to drive through it, so that they wouldn't cut it up and spread it with their boats. In 2020, we actually put up signs on all the roads to make sure people knew what those markers were about, and we extended the marking program. We put down our first benthic mat in 2021, and it's actually a set of 3 mats, which are biodegradable ground coconut mats that we got through or purchased through a company that provides, excuse me, erosion control mats. So we've deployed that in one area, and we made a program available to private owners, property owners, to install benthic mats on their shoreline to limit the growth of milfoil. And we had about 20 of those go in that year. In 2022, that year we also formed the Milfoil Action Committee. And in 2022, this past summer, we continued the marking of the beds, and we had our first attempt at mechanized removal of milfoil from a portion of the lake. So the benthic mat application and mechanized removal both require permits from the NDMNRF and Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Next slide, please. So here's a very small snapshot of the data that Love Your Lake program provided to us. So this is based on the survey, and showed that of the concerns that our property owners were experiencing, water quality was by far the greatest. Next slide, please. Within that water quality metric, not surprising because we have milfoil present, the highest concern, again by far, is aquatic vegetation and algae. And I should add that with the onset of milfoil, we also experienced subjectively an increase in filamentous algae presence in the lake. So back to my point about using this as a rallying point, is people became aware very quickly and concerned that milfoil and algae was changing in the lake, and we've been able to use this as an opportunity to educate them more broadly on water quality issues. Next slide, please. So for those of you who haven't seen it, this is a picture of Eurasian milfoil and what it can grow into, very dense mats. It has very fine leaves, and as it builds up, it basically chokes out other native plants. Next slide, please. So it typically grows to a depth of up to 10 meters, or the extent of the light column. In our lake, that is typically 3 to 5 meters in depth in the growing season. It grows very quickly, and it spreads through fragmentation. So in the fall of the year, it will naturally fragment and float to other parts of the lake based on the current. But in the summer months, boats move it around, and we believe that it was boats through our public boat launch that actually brought it into our lake. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the bathymetry of Wollaston Lake. So think of it as the inverse of a contour map. It shows the depths of the lake. The areas in the darker blue to the right side of the map shows obviously the shallower portions of the lake, and the white sections in the middle are the deep portions of the lake. So as I said previously, in our lake, we expect milfoil to grow in areas of up to 16 feet in depth, because this is in feet. So approximately 40% of the surface area of the lake is a candidate for milfoil growth if we don't do anything to try and limit its spread. And I'm going to talk about primarily the area to the right of this map around the larger island, just in the right bottom, and then the smaller island in the middle of the main lake. Next slide, please. So as I said in our chronology, the first thing we did after education was to start marking beds. This shows you where we, in 2021, the beds that we marked. No surprise, those beds are in the shallower areas of the lake. And the one in the middle bottom is where we installed the largest benthic mat installation. And the upper right, the bottom part of that area of the lake is where we applied the mechanical harvesting. Next slide, please. So before applying for the permits for harvesting, we hired a professional photographer and had drone imaging done of all of the beds in the lake. This is the center island, so that area in the center of the previous map. And for context, the white almost looks like a rectangle in the bottom part of this is a boat that is 18.5 feet in length. So that kind of gives you a perspective on the size. The upper left-hand corner is the half or so of that smallest middle island. And the bed you can see there in the water is a native bed in the center with milfoil all the way around the outside. And the conditions there are suitable for milfoil to be able to grow both exterior to the bed and the size of the bed, as well as move towards the center of the bed and choke out the native plants. So that bed has been marked, but has not had any additional treatment applied to it. And we have seen roughly a 30% increase in the size of that bed. So the growing outwards. We have not been able to measure how much it has affected the native vegetation since we started marking these beds. Next slide, please. So this drone image is much higher. So this bed is much larger. This is in that southeast corner of the lake. And the reason this area was important is it is the location of one of the trailer parks. So it's a very high traffic area in the lake. And as you can see on the right edge of the bed, it's entirely milfoil from the shore, which is below the start of the picture, all the way over to the large island. So basically, it's impossible to drive a boat from that campground without going through milfoil. So this was the area that we targeted for mechanical removal because we wanted to, although it doesn't eliminate the milfoil, it does cut it below the level that boat traffic and other watercraft traffic would fragment the milfoil and spread it around the lake system. Next slide, please. So this is part of a presentation that our milfoil action chair provided to our annual general meeting and to a delegation we held to our municipal council. We did the same in 2021 for them. So it provides a view of what we've accomplished in that time period. So first was we were successful after a long period of time, and it took us roughly 16 months of working with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and NDM and RF to gain our permit for mechanical removal. And that permit was limited to 25,000 square meters of surface area over a 2-day period. And we used a company out of Coburg to do the removal, and we disposed of the milfoil at a neighboring farm where the farmer is going to mix it with manure and use it as compost on his fields after it had dried out. So a number of things that we learned from this process. One is the need to really engage volunteers to help with the collection of any fragmentation, and it was surprisingly small in term relative to what, the amount of milfoil that was removed. But you still need to be vigilant in ensuring that through mechanical harvesting you don't make the problem worse in other parts of the lake. We learned that we need to have a long lead time in both funding the activities, because the mechanical removal cost us approximately $12,000 Canadian for the 2 days, all costs in. So we needed to get started early on fundraising and applying for grants, as well as the permit application process. And we quickly learned that other lakes were quite interested in what we were doing and understanding how it could benefit their initiatives to try and limit milfoil spread. Next slide. In 2022, our education focus was in 3 main areas. So we, for the second year, ran a contest through the local school, because we found it quite useful to engage the public school age children and have them take the messaging home to their families, how important lake health is to the area. We ran 2 education, what we called them blitzes, at our local boat launch, the May long weekend and the July long weekend. The second one was in partner with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, and the focus here was on educating people on invasive species in general, Eurasian milfoil in specific, and the new legislation on clean drain, and overall the importance of the clean drain dry process to preventing other invasive species such as spiny water flea and starry stonewort from getting into Wollaston Lake. And then we also held a post-COVID our annual barbecue, which is a popular event, and Watersheds Canada attended that with a very well received information booth on not only invasive species, but on the need for natural shorelines and the ribbon of life and the importance of that to the health of our freshwater ecosystem. Next slide, please. So this is the final summary. Basically, the recommendations that we would make to any association attempting to mitigate Eurasian water milfoil spread. Can't understate it. Educate, educate, educate. And when you think you've done enough education, educate more, because people are interested, and the more well, our experience has been, the more they learn, the more they want to get involved, which is it leads into the next point, which is involve all the local stakeholders, not just the cottage owners, including municipal government. And we've been somewhat successful in this, mostly with the stakeholders joining our Milfoil Action Committee. So we now have members who are property owners, but also people who live in town who just make day use of the lake. And we're hoping to get representatives from the trailer parks joining. We've had less success with our municipal government. So that's an area that we're going to really put a push on following the municipal election that's taking place this fall. Keep other invasive species out. So learn from the experience of Eurasian milfoil, educate people on the vectors that have led to milfoil coming into the lake and how it's important to really focus on those areas to prevent other invasives from also entering the lake. And then last but not least, partner with experts and integrate into a broader lake health plan. So we're using the awareness that milfoil has provided to develop a state of the lake review, and then subsequent to that, a lake management plan that we intend to have all stakeholders, including municipal government, participate in the review process and buy into the recommendations. So that obviously requires data. We are lucky enough to have 20 years worth of phosphorus data for our lake, and we are measuring the results that we're getting from the activities in milfoil management through the use of drone photography and the estimating of bed growth through the locations of the markings to estimate the size of those beds. So with that, next slide. I'll open it up to any questions you might have if we have time. And if not, I'll address the ones that came in on the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, it was a great presentation, Fred. Thank you so much for sharing this with everyone. I know a lot of people have had questions about your project, so it's really great that we can actually see the process and what was involved. For time's sake, I will ask if you could go through the chat. There were some questions for you, and if anybody else has any other questions for Fred, feel free to put them in the chat. And thanks again. We really appreciate having you today.
Great. Thank you very much.